and other world leaders know that Donald Trump will most likely be the next president of the United States. So Zelensky met at Trump Tower last week. We're going to get into that. And then we're also going to talk about the border czar, or at least who was titled the border czar under the Biden administration. Now she's trying to walk that back. The media is trying to walk that back because they know that the border under Biden-Harris has been so catastrophic for America that they're trying to completely brainwash and wipe our memory slates clean that Kamala Harris was ever the border czar. But nonetheless, she did go down to the border last week because she was feeling, I believe, some heat from a lot of her potential voters, from the American citizens, and her lack of involvement on the southern border. I think it massively backfired, her most recent visit, because it just put the southern border issue under a complete microscope. So we're going to talk about that. Like I said, so happy that you're here on a Sunday evening joining us on the Next Gen. And let's just kick things right off with the first headline of the day. Hezbollah confirms its leader Hassan Nasrallah was killed in an Israeli airstrike. So like I mentioned, this happened on Friday, this past week. And this is extremely important because Nasrallah was really a main player in the Middle East. Killed in an Israeli airstrike. He was 64 years old, but Nasrallah spearheaded Hezbollah's war against Israel in 2006 and really got the group heavily involved in Syria's brutal conflict, but was killed on Friday in southern Beirut by Israel. And I believe that this is going to continue to escalate and steamroll this war between Israel. At first, it was Hamas, the retaliation on the October 7th attack. They were going, as we know, into Gaza, trying to cleanse Gaza or rid Gaza of these Hamas terrorists. Since then, they have continued the fight now into southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. Of course, we have the Houthis in Yemen disrupting the flow of traffic there with a lot of these ships. So, Jerome, what do you have? There's so much to unpack here, and with the Middle East, it's always difficult, right? Because there's so many moving parts and it goes so deep. But I believe that we are on the cusp of a full-on war in the Middle East here, and Israel is really taking it head on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. My main concern with when we're hearing about all these leaders being taken out, obviously it's a good thing, but I want to know what the measures in place are to prevent splintering of these groups, because in the past we have seen when we take out a leader of a terrorist organization or a brutal regime, then after a little bit of infighting, they'll just reorganize, they'll regroup, and then they will form another coalition, and now we'll be fighting against multiple groups at once. So that's something we need to keep an eye on, and I think that as we continue to see Israel's operations expanding into other nations, that is not necessarily a bad thing, because these are also our enemies, and it's better to have, and I hate to say this, but it's better to have them who are already there do the groundwork and not send our own troops over there to get involved. But it also does sort of set a precedent that it was originally against Hamas within the borders of Israel and the Gaza Strip, and now it's slowly creeping outward. So it is very concerning.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at on things too. In no way, shape, or form am I defending Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian state in general. They are our enemies. There are many terrorists that want to wipe not only Israel, we all know they want to wipe Israel off the map, but the United States as well. So there's groups in the Middle East that have a strong disdain towards the Western cultures and Western traditions that we keep sacred here in the U.S., or at least used to. You're seeing the degradation of that right now by our own government, which is intentional. We're going to get to that later on in the show. But my biggest thing is, good on Israel. They're taking out people that truly want to wipe them off the face of the earth, and they are taking this head on with their fight against what they call global terrorism, these enemies against Israel, then of course of the United States. I just am always in the camp, and I've said this on the last few shows, where I do not want the United States to get involved in this war too heavily, because we are already sending so much supplies and taxpayer dollars to Ukraine. We've been doing that for over 2 years now. And now we're going to stretch ourselves even more thin by getting involved in the Middle East, having our money and our resources tied up there, while at the same time, the United States is a sinking ship as far as I'm concerned. It's rotting from within with the flood of illegals coming across the border, the inflation, the insane crime levels in our cities, which actually are not being reported fairly as they should be, which is why, like I saw Pete Buttigieg came out and tweeted the other day, crime is down. That was his big statement on Twitter. That was his tweet, is crime is down. And the comment section, I mean, he was just getting grilled, as he should, because people are waking up that is blatant disinformation and dishonesty from Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. If they want to talk about crime being down under their administration, it's completely misleading because crime is not being reported in a lot of these cities. So circling back here, as our favorite person, Jen Psaki, used to say, tying this all together, we have so many issues here in the United States that I just don't want the United States involvement to go too deep with what's going on in this ever-expanding war now in the Middle East.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're both America First people, and I actually saw on Twitter the minister of the diaspora for Israel made a post. It was in Hebrew, and I had to rely on a translator to obviously translate it, but mentioned something about that Syria and Lebanon and a couple other countries don't meet the definitions of a country, and therefore Israel needs to spend serious time reconsidering the border agreements that they have with these countries. And that, to me, sounds a little bit expansionist. I'm all for taking out the bad guys and all for not allowing what happened on October 7th to happen again. But the issue there becomes, are we financing them to expand rather than just take care of threats that are blatantly a threat to most nations in the world?
Yeah, and I think unlike previous wars that Israel has fought in the past where the United States gets involved in, it was more of a defensive war and protecting their own borders there in Israel. But I think, and have close Jewish friends that are in this camp as well, and they're actually all for this, that Israel's going for broke this time. I think this is different, unlike any wars that we've seen in the Middle East. I think Israel, after they're done with Lebanon and going after Hezbollah and taking them out, I think they're going to continue to push eastward into Syria, eventually into Iran. I think the Middle East right now, and the entire landscape of the Middle East, is going to look vastly different in a year, 3 years, 5 years, because this is going to be, I believe, an ongoing war where Israel's going for broke here. They've had enough. They've clearly, these two religions do not mix. Neither one of them want the other one on this planet. So they're going to, I think, pull out all the stops here, and they're not going to stop fighting until this is resolved in their eyes.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of on the fence, to be honest, though, because like you said, we have so many domestic issues that are just not being addressed. They're not getting the funding from our tax dollars because we work for our money and the government takes it. So, I mean, maybe it is a good long-term strategy because they're already there. They have no intention of leaving. I mean, really, Israelites don't have anywhere else to go for the most part. But what about with the border issues? Like you mentioned, more than 1/3 of law enforcement agencies aren't even reporting crime statistics to the FBI or ICE anymore. We have all these issues with homelessness here. We have an overburdened system, to be quite honest. So I personally would much rather see our taxes being used domestically. But do you think it would be a good long-term solution to help with that? Or
the way that I see it, and this is from the point of view of the Israelis, they feel like, and there's reason to, I can understand why they feel this way. If they don't finish the job this time, if they do not keep pushing into Lebanon, Syria, Iran eventually, and toppling that regime there, then if they don't finish the job this time, they're just going to have another attack in 3 to 5 years. Then we're going to have to start again from square one. I think that Israel is to the point now where like I said, they're going for broke, and I don't think they are going to stop the advancement of this war in the Middle East until the Iranian regime is toppled, which, by the way, a large majority of the Iranian citizens don't even want the current regime there. So Iran is really in between a rock and a hard place now, because not only are they extremely overmatched when it comes to the intelligence. I mean, Mossad, working hand in hand with the CIA, is the greatest intelligence force on the planet, and I don't even think it's close. And then when you factor in that the United States military power, Israel pretty much has that on standby. Iran is they're really up against it, and they don't have the public support back home. So their leadership group there in Iran, I think, is really just searching on what can they do right now, because if Israel does want to continue the escalation of this war, what is Iran going to do? They've been threatening that they're going to retaliate against Israel now for months, after Israel took out one of their leaders back in April, I believe it was the first time Israel took out one of the leaders there of the Iranian regime. And since then, we really haven't seen much at all from Iran. You know, they launched over a couple missiles back in April, and that was like their response, quote unquote. But they also completely telegraphed that to the point where Israel and the entire world really knew when they were going to strike, where they were going to strike. But it was Iran's way of just showing face. But they knew that they had to telegraph that so Israel could defend the missiles coming over. Because if one of those missiles would have landed in Israel and killed civilians, then the United States would have gotten involved.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point that I don't think a lot of people really consider is Iran and nations like Iran historically want to appear to be the big kid on the block, and to have almost like what North Korea does, where they try to show this display of force, but realistically they know if they push it too far, it's going to bite them, and as well as whoever might be allied with them, because if I'm not mistaken, Russia is an ally of Iran, and they're fighting Ukraine. And so neither one of them really seems to have that logistical advantage to where they could withdraw from their own what's going on and then provide reinforcements, right?
Yeah, and I always thought, because growing up you hear that it's the United States and it's Russia. Those are the two superpowers. And while yes, Russia does have allegedly a large amount of nuclear warheads, that even more than the United States, which anytime you're dealing with nukes, even if it's one or two, that's an extremely dangerous and serious situation. But from what I've seen, the way that Russia has had such a difficult time with the Ukraine operation, I've really, unless they're slow playing this just to, drain resources out of the United States, because we're so heavily funding Ukraine and we're sending over military supplies and tens of billions of dollars, unless that's by design by Russia and they're intentionally slow playing it. If this is the best that they have to offer, where they can barely even take on a country as small as Ukraine, what does that say about Russia's military? What does that say about Iran's military when they have just their proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, have gotten decimated by the Israelis, and Iran has basically been sitting on their hands the entire time. So I think the last thing that Iran wants to do, because they know that Russia is not nearly the military power that everybody thought they were, and Iran is certainly overmatched when it comes to Israel and the United States capabilities, I don't think Iran wants any part of this war. And they're kind of letting Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, to some extent, they're kind of leaving them out on their own island and trying to create a little bit of a gap between these proxy groups, because they know that any kind of support that they give to these proxy groups will be seen really as an act of war against Israel, and but just by the process of elimination would be a war on the United States as well.
Yeah, and that's when we consider, war of attrition is really the way that a lot of modern wars are going to be fought, because we want to avoid as much nuclear devastation, as we can muster. But it really sounds like the cards on our table are that we need to get in there and take care of the threat. Not maybe us, but Israel and Ukraine need to do as much as they can to just completely take care of whatever resistance forces and whatever retaliatory forces are there. Whereas one of the other allies of these two nations, Iran and Russia, is China, who has been very quiet and has been
almost like eerily quiet. China, you have really not heard a whole lot. We always talk about the Taiwan situation and how China, and there is aggression in the South China Sea by the CCP, but you have not heard much about China in the last few months since all this has been going down in the Middle East.
And if we look at what they've been doing, just from their own economic policies, they have a lot of resource rights in Africa. Mm-hmm. They have been doing a lot to try to become, to solidify their place as like the global manufacturer. So I don't have any military analysis experience to confirm this, but who's to say that that's not the end game for both of them, is to just keep us spending money on these wars against Iran and against, or I shouldn't say Iran, but the terrorist groups.
It essentially is, though. At the end of the day, it's Iran is the one that is funding and equipping these proxy groups in the Middle East.
But to keep us spending as much of our own resources and as much of our own money, and to really just wither us out trying to help these nations win their respective battles. And China really doesn't have to do a whole lot, because worst case scenario for China or any of those other adversaries, that Israel takes over Iran, expands their borders, gets rid of all the groups, they get what they want, Israel's fine. Worst case scenario for China part 2 would be Ukraine somehow, and I don't see a way that this would happen, but if they were to counterattack Russia to the point where Putin decides to go with a nuclear option, that draws us into play. So either way, it's either going to be, we need to figure out how to get this ASAP, or we're going to be perpetually in a state where we're trying to constantly fight these people that might just be sacrificial pawns, so that way nobody can contest China's global dominance.
Mm-hmm. Well, China's extremely smart, and I think they're playing this beautifully right now. From their point of view, you see the United States, and that really, it's not Russia, U.S. like it was in the Cold War. It's U.S. and China, because they have the two largest economies, and China has really just been thriving and expanding the last 40, 50 years. I mean, they've grown exponentially as far as their world stage. And if I was China, I would probably sit back right now and, hey, let the United States keep sending all their money to the Middle East. Let them keep sending all their money and their equipment to Ukraine. Our southern border is in complete disarray. We have infighting here between citizens. We have crime, like I mentioned, in the cities. So if I were China, and I've said this for years, why would you fire a single bullet? If you want to overtake the United States, if you want to replace the United States as truly the number one superpower in the world, I think China's playing it beautifully. Just sit back and let things unfold, and then strike when the time is right.
Exactly. And if we look at even when Biden was still somewhat conscious enough to actually appear to be the leader of the United States, we had the balloons, which again, Trump also had issues with spy balloons or alleged spy balloons. But the amount of cyber attacks that have been going on where our information's being stolen, not just your name and your Facebook, like literally social security numbers and credit card numbers and everything of that nature. And they know that it comes from China. And what have we actually done as punishment? Because we have that trade agreement. We are almost mutually reliant on each other, to where if we made them mad enough and they stopped selling to us at the prices, well, that's going to further damage our economy, because, I don't think Bidenomics has any kind of contingency plan. So we kind of almost have to play that game. So
they both rely on each other heavily, China and the United States. That's why I don't think there's going to be an all-out war between those two, because they rely on each other too much with their economies. But I do think that, you see China buying up farmland in the United States. You see China having influence with these big American institutions. So it's not going to be a toe-to-toe war between China. It would be more of it's like a chess match. They're through the southern border with the fentanyl, with bioweapons. You look at COVID, obviously, intelligence. So that is going to be the ongoing war with China. But it is crazy that we have really not talked about, not just we, but the media, people on X, where that's the public town hall. That's where I get a lot of my information because it's more reliable and it's a lot more up to date than the mainstream media. It's not as filtered down, but really nobody across the board has been talking about China at all the last few months.
Yeah, I noticed that as well recently, as the developments continue with the Middle East and with Zelensky recently paying visits to both Harris and Trump. I foster dogs. And one of the things you start to realize is when you're sitting there and you don't know where your foster dog's at, you're like, oh, well, where are they at? Like, what are they getting into? What's going on? And I kind of had that moment with China as well. And even with the domestic issues like we were talking about, a lot of the fentanyl crisis is directly because
a huge problem.
China is selling it to these cartels that are coming across the border and bringing it here. There a lot of auto sear switches for Glocks that gangs are using because, firepower supremacy comes down to the amount of rounds you fire. Those are coming from China. A lot of the knockoff stuff. They found a few months ago that Temu, the stuff that's being shipped to us from Temu, has dangerous levels of heavy metals in a lot of those products, especially the ones that are aimed towards children's or trinkets, whatever. And it can they found that it's a harmful level that we're being exposed to just because you want to pay $1 for something that might be worth $5 here.
Oh yeah. Well, you ever see those videos of, and I know we're getting off on a tangent here because we have so much other stuff to get to, but it's something that needs to be taken very seriously, this looming threat with China as we're so tied up in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. But you ever see those videos of those kids, Chinese students that are in class assembling AR-15s, and they're doing these crazy kind of drills. Like I remember back when I was growing up, gym class, you had to do some pretty intense stuff. It was the pull-up contest, push-up contest, climbing ropes. Like that's what China looks like now. Like they're teaching their next generation, not to plug the show here, they're teaching their next generation to be, hard-nosed, tough, physically fit, very disciplined. And you look around at our generation of, let's say, Gen Z and younger, and what they're teaching them in school, and kind of this soft, cushy lifestyle that we've all been accustomed to. And that could really end up backfiring if push comes to shove, because they've been preparing for the serious times, whereas our society, we've gotten very complacent, very comfortable. And as you look throughout human history, that's just a sign of some troubling times ahead, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok, prime example. TikTok is banned in China, yet they have a comparable version that shows them educational content, nationalist content. Meanwhile, we're over here, we are allowing middle schoolers just to brain rot all day with that kind of short form content. They're being exposed to these challenges that are sometimes resulting in them being injured or killed. And if you want to have American nationalism, and I'm not talking the extreme authoritarian, I'm just saying being proud as an American and saying we're number one, a lot of people in our country would take that as like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so... That's what they are instilling in their children in Russia and in China. And, have you read The Art of War? I mean...
Oh, yeah.
Make yourself look weak when you're strong, and when you are strong, make yourself look weak. Strike when your enemy's weak. So I really...
I think it's a waiting game with China.
Yeah.
But the more immediate concern, and immediate as in like days or weeks, we're seeing this unfold, is the Russia-Ukraine and the Israel and the Middle East situation. And Putin was actually on record, this was last week or the week before, saying that he would not be opposed to using nuclear weapons if these NATO countries and the missiles that are supplied to them through the United States strike into Russia. I mean, Putin's been very clear that's a hard line. If there are missiles being launched into Russian territory, he is not taking nuclear weapons off the table. So that's concerning.
Yeah, and that's again the other half of the coin. While we're focused on the victories we're seeing in the Middle East, Putin is still a madman. I mean, he's ex-KGB. From what I can tell, he's probably still upset about the collapse of the USSR, and he is one of those people where he desperately wants to be feared and seen as this great iron fist leader, and he's been mocked for a lot of the failures of the Ukrainian invasion. Now, something I was thinking about is when it comes to Zelensky coming to the United States and talking with Harris and then coming and talking to Trump, on the one hand, it could be you're trying to hedge your odds by being in a favorable position with whoever may end up being president. But one thing that stuck out to me was that Zelensky actually, before he came and did the meetings, was on a podcast, and he said that he considered Trump's plans for how to deal with the Russian war were too radical. Whereas I have not seen him criticizing anything that Harris has proposed, and I don't personally feel that somebody like Harris would have the military knowledge or that sort of mindset. Not saying that Trump absolutely would, but Tulsi Gabbard is and J.D. Vance are both military veterans.
Nobody is going to take Kamala Harris seriously. You're telling me if she goes and sits down with Putin, which I don't even think she would. That's the one thing you have to appreciate about Trump, and the media always gives him heat about this. Oh, he's best friends with Putin. He's best friends with Kim Jong-un over North Korea. It's like, no. Wouldn't you want a world where you can actually sit down and have a conversation with your adversaries?
Exactly.
Like, why is that a bad thing? Just sitting down with another world power and with Putin and Russia, having that dialogue, at least coming to the table and having a conversation on how we can potentially resolve our issues and continue to keep the world a relatively peaceful place. Why is that a bad thing to sit down and have that conversation? But the media, they see that as, oh, he's in bed with Russia or Trump's in bed with Kim Jong-un. They're writing love letters together. A guy that has access to nuclear weapons, I think it's probably a good idea to try to have at least a decent working relationship with that person.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to compare Trump to Reagan, because Reagan was a lot more on the conservative side of things. But if you look at how he dealt with de-escalating the Cold War, it wasn't trying to flex the might of the United States and we're going to fight you and all this. No, he was meeting up with the Soviets, and trying to find ways of avoiding any sort of militaristic
nuclear conflict. Literally, essentially.
That's what he did. He would go there. He tried to use his wit, his charm. He tried to do everything that was within his power to work with the Soviets to avoid, and this was right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was Kennedy. So I agree entirely. Why is it a bad thing that people that would, in a heartbeat, cause a nuclear war are willing and able to have conversations with President Trump, and that makes him bad? But the leader, the current vice president, the current administration is a laughingstock to the point where nobody would take us even seriously if they were to say nuclear war,
Quite literally a laughingstock. And we're going to talk about that after the break. What do we have, Jerome?
We are at 30 minutes, and we'll be right back after this.
Oh, crap. We were at 30 minutes?
Friday night and I'm riding solo. When I touch down, give it on the low low. I don't mess with your energy. No photos. So antisocial, but I don't care. Don't give a damn, I'm gonna smoke here. Got a bottle in my hand, bring more though. Got my hat low, don't talk to me. I've been down, give me some space. You don't know what's in my brain. Music loud, he's in my pain. Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. I came to vibe, yeah. On something, on something, on something. I wanna buy it. Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. I came to vibe, yeah. Won't let nothing come in between me and the night. Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. I came to vibe, yeah. On something, on something, on something. I wanna buy it. Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. I came to vibe, yeah. Won't let nothing come in between me and the night.
I need room where you standing way too close, you might catch fumes.
You're listening to The Next Generation with Danny Define.
All right.
I think that's an extremely awesome name because in a way, we're similar in age, but we are the next generation.
That's
we
it.
are going to be I saw a quote, you are the future founding fathers. You better start acting like
100%, man. 100%. Okay. So we'll just get right into Kamala. Fire it back up, baby.
And we are rolling.
All right, welcome back to the Next Gen with Danny Define. As always, I'm your host, Danny Define, and I know we went a little bit long on the whole situation in the Middle East and in Ukraine and Russia. But hey, you know what? On the brink of a global conflict, possibly nuclear weapons being used, I feel like that deserves 2 segments, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure, when China reemerges in the mainstream media, you'll be looking back and saying, see,
yeah,
we were talking about this when no one else was.
We were. And that is such a great point, Jerome. And I'm glad that you brought this up even before we started the show here tonight, because even myself, admittedly, China has not really been on the radar. And it's such a easy thing to look over when you have all this going on overseas in Europe and the Middle East. But that is still this, let's call it the sleeping giant, if you will. I think China would be the biggest headache for the United States just because of the size of their economy, their population, and their incredible intelligence that they have over there. So we will see. It is truly incredible times that we're living through right now. We just have to make sure that in 37 days that we can get Donald J. Trump back in office, because I believe that although not a perfect candidate, there are some things that I have that, I'm not crazy about with Trump, but I will take my chances of Trump in the White House with global peace and restoring a little bit of sanity back here in the United States and some decency. I'll take my chances with Trump over Kamala Harris every day of the week.
Absolutely. And that's, admittedly, I was one of those people where I just could not bring myself the last 2 elections to follow Trump. I bought into the mainstream media nonsense. Doesn't mean I supported his opponents either, but he definitely, this time around, it's clear as day to anybody that actually cares about this nation. This is our one chance to prevent all of the issues that have been going on for the past 3.5 years, for potentially happening for another 8. And, going back to China just real quick, not only is there the controversy around Tim Walz's connections to China from when he was in the National Guard and when he was a teacher and cooperating with people and working with people that have been confirmed propagandists and Chinese communist agents over there, but just recently with New York, there's an aide to the governor of New York that has been involved in our politics that just got convicted of being a literal Chinese asset and working to push CCP propaganda. So it's in the border. With everything going on with the borders, it's in our government in these democratic areas. I mean,
well, yeah, look at Swalwell. Wasn't Swalwell mixed up with a Chinese spy? And Mitch McConnell, they claim that him and his partner, his wife, have ties to the CPP or CCP. Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole here, but there are a lot of connections with our politicians, our representatives being compromised by the Chinese government.
Yeah, and so when we're thinking contextually of the domestic issues, I mean, I don't want to go all tinfoil hat, but I mean, it is a little suspicious. And, then you have Kamala going down to the border, and I saw I don't know, did you see the tweet from the Border Patrol Union?
Yeah, as far as the number of known criminals that are pouring into the country.
Yep.
Yeah, I have the numbers right here, actually, and this is from ICE Deputy Director Patrick Lichtleitner. Either way, Deputy Director of ICE coming out with these numbers. Like I said in the beginning of the show, Kamala Harris going to the border, she thought that was going to be a good move for her campaign because she has been getting so much criticism for being the border czar and overseeing the worst southern border in our nation's history. So she thought, you know what, this might be good then to go down to the border to show that I actually care. First time she's been down there in years. But this report dropped from the deputy director there of ICE. So we have over 13,000 people right here in this country, non-detained, non-citizen, convicted criminals. We have over 13,000 that have been convicted of homicide in the U.S. right now. We have over 15,000 convicted of sexual assault. Total, the number of non-detained, non-citizen, convicted criminals is over 425,000 in the United States right now.
That is unacceptable.
To say the least. So you're talking about 50 states, you have almost 100,000 per state. Think about that. Over 100,000 right around there per state where you could have a convicted illegal immigrant, convicted criminal, illegal alien in your state.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. I mean,
let's just crunch the numbers here. I said 13,000. I'm looking at the report right now. 13,099 convicted of homicide that are in this country right now illegally. So if you just did the quick math here, you take 50 states divided by, or 13,000 divided by 50 states, how many convicted murderers are in each state?
Yeah, that would be like, what's 65 or 650,000, something like that?
That would be... No, you're looking at per state about 260 people per state.
You can tell I'm not a mathematician.
Yeah, but if you have 13,000 illegals that are in this country convicted of homicide, and you divide that by 50, you're looking at about 260 people per state that are convicted murderers.
Jeez.
That are here illegally.
And for further context, because I'm from Chicagoland area, to date they've had about 420.
Yeah.
And that in Chicago is one of the most dangerous cities, along with St. Louis and some others. But that is half of Chicago with 2 billion plus people having that crime rate spread out across every state in America.
It's insane. So we are facing this massive invasion of the southern border. Meanwhile, we're sending our resources and our troops and money overseas. And I don't know if you saw this. This is another developing story. This happened here over the weekend. So the Minneapolis Police Department just added their first non-citizen officer to their police force. Did you see that story?
I did, but I almost thought that was like a Babylonian Bee or an Onion article.
I had to check this multiple times because I just couldn't. As crazy as a world that we're living in, as messed up as this country is right now, I thought, okay, this has got to be parody or satire. But no, this is straight out of Minneapolis. The Minneapolis Police Department just hired their first non-citizen and Somali woman to join their police force. Officer... And again, I always get tongue-tied with these names. Ikran Mohammed, 23 years old, is the Somali woman who was just hired as an officer of the law. According to reports, she's been in the U.S. less than 15 years. But I think this is all, again, you have a non-citizen from Somalia that is now in the police force in Minneapolis. And I've told you this before. I've been to Minneapolis. I was just there back in January. And the amount of headscarves you would see, it was like 1 out of every 4 women. I felt like I was in the Middle East, and this is Minneapolis, Minnesota, and now they're starting to accept non-citizens into their police force. That's truly terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario, she overstayed a visa or something, right? So she may have legally started off here, but at the end of the day, that you were literally letting somebody that is breaking the law be in charge of enforcing the law. What kind of backwards logic is that?
It's insane, but I think it is all, as I've said for years now, I think it's all by design. It's all by design that we're letting people, unvetted people, come through the southern border from Honduras, Venezuela, Haiti, Africa, the Middle East. You're seeing them now disperse into every single state, every single city in the country. And that's why Trump, it's so spot on that every state now is a border state. Every single state is now, I even see it here in the state of Missouri. Going down to downtown St. Louis, I talked about it last week, about that article from the Post-Dispatch, just, head over heels that we're the number one metro region for foreign-born immigrants over the last year. And why not, instead of importing people from majority third world countries, why don't we just try to focus on our own citizens here, take care of them, maybe reform a lot of these policies that are keeping people like myself, I used to live downtown, that's driving people out of the city. Why not focus on fixing the root cause of the problems, which are these disastrous far left radical policies to drive people that moved out to the suburbs or out to the country, drive them back into the city, American citizens, versus just importing a bunch of third world immigrants.
Yeah, and I agree entirely. I mean, at this point, it has to be by design, right? Because if I was to play devil's advocate, right, at the very least, illegals that are working under the table, at least they generate some form of taxes when they spend the money, right? But when you have the Democrats voting against stuff like the SAVE Act, where it would require you to prove you're a citizen to vote, right? And that other bill, I can't remember what it's called, but 158 Democrats voted against a bill that would deport illegals specifically caught and convicted of sexual assault.
Yeah, it was a sex crime ban on immigrants, and 158 Democrats voted against this. This was last week.
Like what?
It was a bill by Nancy Mace.
Wow. Yeah. In what world does it make sense? Why? Like, I'm just speechless about that. There's no way that this is not being done to bolster up and to continually get more people in to swing a lot of these states towards Democratic control.
Yeah, and you don't hear a peep from the feminists either. That's the thing. They want to talk about how Trump and the Republican Party are so anti-women because they get so hung up on this abortion issue. But I say it all the time. If you keep importing people from the third world and you let all these unvetted migrants just run amok across every state, every city in the country, access to abortion is going to be the least of your concerns. This Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act, it did pass 266 to 158. This was two weeks ago. Every Republican present voted for the bill, as did 51 Democrats. But like you said, Jerome, 158 Democrats voted against it.
So, I mean, props where props due. At least 51 Democrats have at least some sort of common sense going on right now. But that is way too many to be against something that it literally protects us. It literally stops what we're seeing in sanctuary cities where they're not reporting these crimes to ICE. They're letting them go. They're not detaining them. What do you make of it?
It's so frustrating. And, you look at like gas prices right now, how they've come down. I think on the drive here tonight, I saw gas prices in the St. Louis area were hovering right around like $2.55 for a gallon of gas, which is down significantly from where they were. You're also seeing that Biden put in place some tougher restrictions on the southern border, so immigration's dipped a little bit since he did that earlier this year. But let's not have short-term memory here. Let's think about what the Biden-Harris administration did before the last few months. They're just trying to tidy things up a little bit to give people the illusion that they have things figured out as we get closer to the election here in November. But I can guarantee you, if Kamala Harris is elected in November, you're going to see the southern border as wide open as it's ever been. You're going to see gas prices continue to shoot through the roof. They're just playing this little cat and mouse game right now to in the hopes of people saying, oh, well, you know what? No, gas is coming down. The border has been a little bit better the last few months. That this is all part of their game to give you the illusion that they're the right people to have. But as soon as they get power, as soon as Kamala Harris gets 4 years, you are going to see complete destruction in the United States.
Yeah, and going back to the Border Patrol Union, after Kamala finally shows up, they tweeted out and said she had all this time to come here, and one of the first things she said was, "We need more resources to take care of this." Convenient that's 30. You waited till 38 days until the election to actually make that statement. This is Border Patrol. You are like, we have the people there to do the job. They're just not being allowed to do the job.
Yeah, and it's to the point now where you need. You almost need the United States military. You need the National Guard to come in and fix this issue at the southern border. Let's not send our resources overseas. Let's secure the southern border. I believe, and Trump has said it multiple times, and I hope he actually backs this up, that we need mass deportations because we're at a point now where estimates are there's 30 to 40 million illegals living in this country. A good majority of those came in under the last 3.5 years under the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, at this point, too, we're at such a point where, like, think about the biggest plane or the biggest train. Like, how many people could really realistically fit per trip? Like, how many trips is that going to take? How much of our gas? How many man hours? Like, how much are we going to suffer further getting rid of all these people? And I think that's the point that they are trying to make is, we made it so bad that you might as well just let them stay, and you might as well let them vote for us, you know.
Yeah, it is going to, if you do a mass deportation like that, because there are a lot of illegal immigrants that are a critical part of the economy. So in the short term, there's going to be a lot of pain. When you talk about mass deportations and getting rid of all of these illegals that are in this country, the economy will suffer because of it. However, this is my opinion. And I know a lot of other Americans are willing to take that short-term pain of losing a large part of the economy with these illegals. I am willing to take that gamble to have the short-term pain for the long-term benefit.
Yeah, that's something I've really been impressed the more I get to know you about, because I mean, we look at a lot of the same news sources, and you can hear me all worked up. You like are very level-headed about it, and that's something that I think that a lot more people could benefit from. You know, it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt.
You have to rip
That's the reality of it. But I think that's why you're seeing this awakening the last year, especially with young people. And that's why I call my show The Next Gen, because it's going to take the younger generation, myself, I just turned 32. It's going to take people like my age, like your age, and younger to wake up and really start pushing for positive change. And I think that's why you're seeing more people are getting involved. More people have gone back to the church, to, moral values, family, traditional values. And it's always the darkest before the dawn, right? So that's how I stay sane, is I know that just based on the law of physics, for every negative action, there has to be an opposite, hopefully in our case, positive reaction. And I don't think we've hit rock bottom yet. I think we're getting there. If Kamala Harris gets back in office, we're going to get there a lot quicker. But it's going to take something like that for people to wake up and realize that we need to get on a course correction here.
Yeah, and much respect for you for being the change you want to see. I know we're running short on time now, so I really appreciate you letting me be part of your show, and look forward to working with you more.
Always a pleasure, Jerome. And yeah, for all those listening, keep fighting the good fight. You can follow me on Twitter, X, @DanielJDefine. And as always, greatly appreciate you tuning into The Next Gen.